Hi there, I'm David, and I'm here to tell you everything you need to know to get up to speed on the Bitcoin revolution. If you're new to Bitcoin, understand that it is a new financial asset that is trying to revolutionize the way money works forever. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some things like the origins of Bitcoin and how the identity of its creator, known only as Satoshi Nakamoto, remains a mystery to this day. The basics of how blockchain technology, which powers Bitcoin, actually works. Where can you actually get some Bitcoin, and how can you safely store it yourself? Lastly, we'll talk about some of the most recent developments, as well as what lies in the future still for Bitcoin. By the end of this video, you should be familiar with all of the basics and more, and be ready to start getting involved in this unprecedented and highly exciting new form of currency. So what are we waiting for? Let me explain to you what makes Bitcoin so amazing. In 2008, the world suffered from a global financial crisis caused largely by unethical banking standards that are supported worldwide. On October 31st, a document titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, was released onto a cryptography mailing list. The author used the name Satoshi Nakamoto, generally believed to be a pseudonym, and this paper would outline the ins and outs of how the Bitcoin network would actually function. To this day, nobody really knows who Satoshi Nakamoto actually was, or if it was even just one person. There's no shortage of theories floating around as to who was behind that paper. And what we know for sure is that this individual was active on cryptography forums leading up to and a couple of years after Bitcoin was created. Then, all of a sudden, Satoshi just went dark and has pretty much remained so ever since. On January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi created the very first Bitcoin to ever exist. Now, how that process works is a subject we'll come back to in a little bit. But by January 9th, the code for Bitcoin version 0.1 had been released to the community. This meant that anybody could start getting involved in creating their own Bitcoin. And then, just 3 days later, Satoshi performed the world's first Bitcoin transaction, when he sent 10 Bitcoins to cryptography expert and programmer Hal Finney. Now, before we go any further, I should explain what it is that makes these events so exciting, which will require us to dig a little deeper into what it is Satoshi Nakamoto actually created. You see, Bitcoin is the world's first fully functioning blockchain. Cool, so what does that mean? Well, imagine a ledger. Of course, any type of traditional ledger can be falsified. Great efforts can be made to limit who has access to the ledger, and an independent third party could come in to audit it, but this still presents a couple of problems. One, it takes a lot of work hours just to keep the system honest. And two, inevitably there's always going to be a handful of entities who you'll have to trust, because unless you're doing the audits yourself, there's always going to be places where deception or corruption can still sneak in. Okay, now imagine that instead of being locked away for only a privileged few to edit or verify, instead everybody has a copy of the ledger. They can see the entire history of it at any time, and it's updated instantly whenever a transaction occurs. Think about that. Complete transparency. There'd be no need for audits or trust because literally everyone could see what anyone is doing. When a new block is created, it gets broadcast to every entity on the Bitcoin network, which are called nodes. Nodes can all talk to each other, and as the block propagates through the network, they create a form of consensus that this block does indeed only contain valid transactions. Okay, so who creates these blocks? Well, there's special types of nodes that are referred to as miners. Miners use powerful computers to solve complex cryptographic functions that are irreversibly tied to all of the transaction data to ever occur on the network. I know that sounds complicated, but don't worry, we're not going to get into the math today. Just understand that there's a verifiable way to prove that every new block can be trusted, and anybody on the network is free to double check this at any time. At this point, you might be wondering, well, if it takes so much computational effort to solve these problems, how is it that other nodes on the network are able to verify that the work has been done correctly so quickly? Well, the best analogy I have here is actually a Sudoku puzzle. See, it takes a lot of time and effort to solve a Sudoku puzzle, but if you know the rules, it really only takes moments to verify that the work's been done right. Now, Sudoku has nothing to do with Bitcoin, that's just that the same logic applies here. So when new Bitcoin gets created, where does it actually exist? Well, all Bitcoin exists on the network in what are known as addresses. Addresses are basically long, complex numbers that can hold any amount of Bitcoin. Whenever somebody performs a transaction on the blockchain, they're basically announcing to the network, I would like to move X amount of Bitcoin from this address to this one. They'll also need to provide a special secret key that's generated alongside each new address. If the correct key is provided, and the sending address does have enough Bitcoin in it, then a miner should include that transaction into a block. Once that block has been propagated around the network, all the nodes will look at it and provide consensus that yes, that was a valid transaction. It will now be part of the immutable history of the blockchain. At this point, we should probably mention fees. Yes, Bitcoin transactions do have fees attached to them. However, you should know that it works a little bit differently than what you're probably used to with other payment systems. Whenever a transaction gets created, The sender will also put a little bit of extra Bitcoin on top of what is being sent to act as the fee. Now these fees are the incentive for miners to include transactions in blocks. In addition to the aforementioned block reward that the miners get, they also get the fees on every transaction that they include. Since only so many transactions can fit into a single block, generally speaking, they'll put the ones with the highest fees attached to them first. What this means is you can pay higher fees to ensure that your transaction is given top priority, but even with a very low fee, something well under 1%, should still see your transaction included inevitably into one of the next few blocks. Let's do a quick recap about what it is we're describing here. A global payment system with its own native currency. Anybody with a computer and internet access can download the software and run their own node or miner. Transactions can be sent to any address on the network without fear of being blocked, intercepted, or censored. Every member of that network is helping to secure it, and it has no central point of failure. So long as at least one person is still running a Bitcoin node, the network can still be said to exist. This is the essence of why those first few milestones in Bitcoin's history were so important. At the time, only a handful of cypherpunks knew it, but Bitcoin was alive and working as intended. In the early days, there was a small but growing amount of people who were mining and trading among themselves, mostly as a novelty, but it wouldn't be long before Bitcoin would find a real exchange rate. One of the first known exchanges of Bitcoin for something that can actually be priced in US dollars was on May 18, 2010, when a programmer named Laszlo negotiated the exchange of 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. Given that the 2 pizzas taken together were worth about $30, this would mean that in this transaction the Bitcoin used was still valued at less than 1 cent per coin. However, as more users began to get involved and the first public exchanges opened, the price of Bitcoin quickly rose. Less than a year after the pizza incident, Bitcoin was already trading as high as $1, which is pretty impressive for something that a year prior had no established value. If you think that's good, by November of 2013, Bitcoin was trading at $1,200 per coin. Arguably, this growth was way too fast, and sure enough, the first bubble burst. One of the largest Bitcoin exchanges at the time, known as Mt. Gox, would announce its insolvency and shut down in 2014. This would trigger a crash that would see the price of Bitcoin drop back down into the low to mid-hundreds range for the next few years. We should mention that during this time, Bitcoin wasn't growing up in a vacuum. Its code is all open source, so it wasn't long before people copied it, modified it, and began releasing their own variations. This led to the term cryptocurrencies to evolve, which basically is a blanket statement for anything like Bitcoin or other digital assets that followed in its philosophy. This has led to a vast ecosystem of cryptocurrencies, each with their own pros, cons, and use cases. And you can look forward to our next video when we'll crack open some of the most popular of these projects. But for now, back to Bitcoin. In early 2017, the price of Bitcoin would finally break the previous all-time high, and this would kick off a year-long bull run, which would see a new high reached in December of just under $20,000. As is the way of market cycles, this predated yet another crash, and throughout 2018, the price of Bitcoin dropped lower and lower until reaching a low of around $3,300, almost exactly a year after reaching its previous all-time high. Since then, it began to climb yet again, has reached as high as $14,000, and at the time of me shooting this video, is sitting somewhat comfortably around the $9,000 to $10,000 range, with a lot of ups and downs along the way. Alright, let's say after hearing all that, you're like, sounds great, I'm in. But what do I do to actually get some Bitcoin? Well, first off, know that you don't need to be running a node or a miner in order to get any. These are important parts of securing the network, but you don't need to be participating in securing the network in order to interact with the network any more than you do with, say, a social network. For beginners, the easiest place to get your first Bitcoin is probably going to be on an exchange. Bitcoin exchanges work just like they do for traditional asset types, but the process can be a little daunting if you're new. Just know that the biggest companies have made great strides in user experience so that purchasing Bitcoin with a credit or debit card is usually no more difficult than buying anything on the internet. The purchase can be made in US dollars or other currencies, and afterwards the Bitcoin can be transferred off of the exchange for personal safekeeping or kept on the exchange and actively traded with. By the way, looking for a great cryptocurrency exchange? Then check out Stormgain. Stormgain is a Newcastle United shirt sponsor and the hottest upcoming exchange that allows you to trade 200x leverage on all the major cryptocurrency pairings. Learn how to trade with a free $50,000 demo account, join trading competitions, and use the tools and indicators that will allow you to begin analyzing the market like a pro. Click the link down in the description to get started today. Okay, we'll tell you everything you need to know about trading in a video real soon. But for now, let's say you just bought your first Bitcoin and you just want to store it. We've already talked about addresses and broadcasting transactions, but how do you actually access this stuff? Well, this is where something called wallets usually enters the picture. A wallet is the name used for software that allows you to manage one or usually several Bitcoin addresses. It'll monitor the addresses, keep track of the value, and also allow you to post new transactions to the network. At this point, we should let you know that there's an element of trust here if you're not running your own node. See, your wallet software will have to use some node to talk to the blockchain. So if you don't have one, it'll have to talk to someone else's. Now, this is not inherently a problem. There's lots of different wallet software out there that's open source and is very transparent about what nodes it's using. Not to mention the fact that because your transaction is encrypted, whoever's operating this other node shouldn't be able to do anything to tamper with it. But we wanted to let you know that unless you're doing it yourself, there is a stage where you have to trust someone else's node. To recap, Bitcoin can be easily acquired through a variety of reputable online exchanges and can be stored on your personal computer or mobile device using wallet software. Wallet software should be available online or through an app store, usually for free. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's really all you need to understand to start using Bitcoin today. What lies in the future for Bitcoin? The short answer here is that nobody really knows because this is something completely unprecedented in the history of the human race. We've glossed over much of Bitcoin's varied history, but be aware that over the last decade, developers have worked hard to streamline and upgrade several parts of the network and continue to do so today. Work can be a little slow because it's done by various passionate teams of people all over the planet with no central business governing over them. Updates are thoroughly vetted and reviewed because nobody wants to break what already works. And to that end, it really does work. The Bitcoin network has existed since the first block was mined, with virtually no downtime, over 10 years. Not many networks can boast that. It's also never successfully been hacked or disrupted, and as far as anyone is aware, there doesn't appear to be a realistic way to do so. That being said, there is still work to be done. While Bitcoin already works great, it's not yet ready to handle the sheer volume of transactions that it would see if the whole world started using it. Fortunately, there are multiple solutions being explored right now that would improve capacity of the network, and many are confident that one or more of these will come together to allow Bitcoin to scale with its growing popularity. One such example is the Lightning Network, which sits on top of Bitcoin and leverages the power of the blockchain, but is notably faster and cheaper than Bitcoin already is. Once fully implemented, this could be the realization of Bitcoin as a true digital cash that it was always meant to be. While Bitcoin certainly isn't perfect yet, it has already addressed many of the issues plaguing the traditional financial world. There are people globally who are hoping that this revolution can help create a more level playing field for everyone. This has yet to be proven, but it doesn't look like Bitcoin's going anywhere anytime soon. Okay, that seems like a pretty good place to wrap it up for today. But be sure to come back next time as we take a step beyond Bitcoin and start looking at the world of altcoins. For now, you should have enough to start getting your feet wet and possibly going a little bit deeper if you'd like. To that end, be sure to check out some of BeInCrypto's other educational content as well as interviews on YouTube. And if you can't wait to start learning about trading, maybe take a glance over at our Signals group on Telegram. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe below if you want to keep seeing this type of content. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video on here real soon.